Hi there. A few years ago I posted a video here on YouTube about how to preserve your garden greenery using glycerin. So I thought, why not refresh that video and make a point of answering the questions that you asked me in the comments underneath that video. Now, first of all, one of the common questions I've got is, can you use the glycerin method of preserving greenery on flowers? So roses, lavender, people have mentioned dandelions and oxeye daisies as well. So if you are thinking that you would like to preserve your roses and lavender, this is not the video for you. I would not use glycerin for those two flowers. And I would use the air drying method instead. So if you're particularly interested in lavender, I can leave a link to the video up above. Actually, I think it's up above, and direct you to that. So stop watching the video now and switch over to my one on lavender. I will make a video on drying roses in due course. Now, dandelions and oxeye daisies, those are new for me. I have never used the air dry method for those. I think they're going to be too delicate, but if you are thinking of preserving the dandelion clocks, I have heard that air spray is really good for doing that, and possibly you might need to spray them with the hairspray, I should have said, before you pick them, because they are really delicate. So you might need to go out into your garden and spray them with your hairspray and then pick them and put them somewhere where they won't get knocked. I've also been asked whether you can use the glycerin method for preserving hops, and you'll see as I get into the video that some of the more delicate natural plant materials are too fine and delicate, and they're not robust enough to hold the thick glycerin mix. So I haven't had any, I've never tried, I don't think it'll be very successful. And also mistletoe I've been asked about, and I've assumed that's the mistletoe berries, and you'll see in the video clip coming up that I've tried to use the glycerin method for preserving elderberries, and that wasn't successful at all, and I think probably the same would apply for the mistletoe. So on to the next bit of the video, I'm going to give you a recap as to how I preserve my garden greenery, and then the second part of the video I'll give you a follow-up, so that's a week later, and you can see how well I got on. I've got the kettle on this morning, boiling away. I've got myself some glycerin, and as you can see behind me, I've been cutting some greenery, so I have got some greenery to preserve in my glycerin so that I can use it later on in the year. During the winter months when we haven't got so much fresh greenery to hand, it's always nice to have something to bring back memories of the summertime. So I need to make up a mix of glycerin and hot water. So I've boiled my kettle. You don't have to use boiling water, it just needs to be sufficient hot enough to sort of break down the glycerin, mix it up. It's like pouring out syrup, and you need to loosen up the mix a little bit in order that your greenery can take up the glycerin and then preserve it. So this isn't an instant job, it's something I'll need to keep an eye on over the next week to 10 days. Hopefully by 10 days my greenery will have changed from bright green colour you can see behind me to more of a sort of mahogany brown. So we are getting our greenery and to be shades of brown. So I've got my measuring jug here. I'm going to measure out 200 mils of my glycerin, which will be, as I say, a little bit gloopy. We've got this sort of gloopy mix here, a little bit viscous. That was probably the word I was looking for earlier, a viscous mix. And then I'm going to add in, because I had 200 millilitres of the glycerin, so 400 millilitres, which takes us up to 600, of the hot water. So it doesn't need to be boiling, but it does need to be sufficiently hot to break down that viscous quality of the glycerin. 600, and mix it round so it just dissolves and is going to be more like water in consistency, and then easier for the stems to take up water. So perhaps in the comments Let me know whether you've tried this before. Let me know what you had success with. And if you have any, outright failures, what didn't work for you? And then we can all learn from each other. So that is all mixed through. So it does have the consistency of water. And now I need to look through my greenery, and I just need to prepare it. So I've cut my greenery this morning from the garden and actually from a walk home from town. And you need to treat your greenery as you would any other greenery. So I cut the greenery, put it straight in water when I got home, but I need to prepare the stem ends because I don't want any leaves sitting inside my glycerin mix and then rotting off. So we treat it as we would do a normal flower arrangement. So other advice I would give you, I've got quite a wide-mouthed jug here, and it's that little sort of psychological trick is to, how much of a liquid have you got when you've got a wide mouth compared to a smaller mouthed container. So there isn't much depth here, so I'm going to transfer this into a smaller mouthed container in order that my mix comes higher up the container, so I'll actually be able to get my stems to stick inside. So this actually is a plastic container, so I don't want to melt it, I'm sure I won't, but just for safeness I will put a spoon in to take away the heat. Tip that in there so you can see that it does look much deeper. And then with my greenery here, I know some of these things are going to work no problem. So this is beech. So a nice branch of beech, and it's got a clean stem end. So I can recut the stem and put that into my jug of water. So you're only restricted by how much you can get into your jug. I'm doing this to use my greenery for flower arranging. So if you're into flower pressing, you might want to take off your individual leaves and have a tray, like a casserole dish, something like that, and actually lay your leaves direct onto the surface of the water. But because I want to have long stems I can use in traditional flower arrangements, or perhaps for wreath making later in the year, I'm keeping them in a sort of vase-like receptacle. And then I have got a few things. This is more beech here, but I did think I would try some different materials and just see how it works. So this is the time of year to do it. So we're heading into high summer, and you want to pick your greenery when the sap is still rising. So you don't want to do this too early in the year when your leaves are still quite immature and a bit floppy, and you leave it too late in the year, the plants are starting to become dormant, so they're not going to be sucking up the water in the same way. So this is Japanese maple, and it's a practice, I've never done this with Japanese maple before. The leaves are much more delicate, so I'm not entirely sure whether they're going to take up the glycerin or whether the glycerin is going to be too heavy for them and they're going to collapse a little bit. So I need to take off the leaves at the end, recut the stems, and into my container there. And then these are the leaves of the London plane. Now these might be too big and they might flop. So that might not work, and actually I can tell that there's some new growth here, and I think they will flop anyway, the sort of very new leaves on the edge there. But it's worth giving it a go, and if it doesn't work, I can just put my leaves on the compost heap and try something else again another time. A few stems of Cotoneaster. So these are, I think these probably will work quite well. They seem quite robust leaves, but they are smaller leaves, so I will need to keep checking back to see whether it's worked. And the only way you know whether this process has worked is because you'll see your leaves start to change colour, and then eventually it'll get to the stage where you think, actually I think they're going to take up as much as they possibly can. So probably I'm anticipating that the Cotoneaster will be done quite quickly in relation to the larger leaved beech leaves. So I'll be putting things out of the vase as and when. I won't keep everything in the container because if you keep it in too long, it takes up so much glycerin, it starts to sort of bubble out of the back of the leaves, and you don't want that. So some more beech leaves. And I have got bay. So you can see here some new growth that's flopping already. So that I think is just going to flop even more, but I won't do anything about that until it does start to take up the glycerin. Pull off the leaves and then recut. So because I've used that very hot water out of the kettle, that will shock the stems into opening up, and that will hopefully help the uptake of the glycerin as well. And some Hornbeam. So I've done Hornbeam before, it works really well. And the beech works really well, so I know about those. So taking off the leaves that are going to be inside the vase, the jug, recut the stems. And then this is what's this? Viburnum opulus, the sort of snowball viburnum. I think this one is either green or white, I can't quite remember. Now some of the leaves have been nibbled and they don't look very good, so I'm going to pinch those off because I'm never going to want to use a leaf that looks like that. But wouldn't that be lovely? I mean, it'd be lovely in a vase on its own, but imagine that looking all coppery brown and very autumnal come September and October. And ivy, trails of ivy. So again, taking off the leaves, recut the stems. And then a bit of a test, a trial. I have picked some elderberry. So I've missed elderflower season for making elderflower cordial. It's too early to pick the elderberries to make jam or wine, if that's what you're into. And I'm just curious to know whether the berries will preserve, and also the leaves. The leaves are much finer than any of the other leaves, and if I had to put money on this, I would say I don't think this is going to work. But you never know until you try. But wouldn't that be fabulous if you were able to preserve that with the glycerin, so you've always got those berries, you know, in suspended animation. So into the bucket they go. So I will put that on the side. I mean, if I'd arranged them more artfully, I could have had that as you know, a flower arrangement in its own sake. Actually, I've just discovered I need to take the spoon out. I'll be looking for that serving spoon later on. So take the spoon out, and I'm going to put this in my workshop. I'm going to let it fan out. I don't want things to get sort of too tight and congested, but I'm reasonably sure I've got good value for money out of that glycerin, but I haven't overpacked it. And over time, the water level will go down, which is why I've kept it in a small container so it stays deep, and also it will turn this really, really dark mahogany brown colour as well. So it's going to look quite yucky. So just to recap with some more of those questions that you've been asking me since I published my first video. One of them was, do you need to use hot water or cold water when you dilute and make the glycerin mixture less viscous? I used hot water. I boiled a kettle and let it go off the boil, so it wasn't actually boiling water, but I think you would need to use very hot water in order that you can get the mixture more free flowing and less like golden syrup. And I am using, as a florist and a flower arranger, I am preserving my greenery to use in my flower arrangements. So if you are a crafter and you are making, pressed flower details, or you're wanting to preserve some greenery to use in your home decor, perhaps you want to use large leaves and put them under your cheese board or something like that. You will do things slightly differently. So I found with the bigger leaves that they just go flop, and I can't use them in my flower arrangements when I want them to hold their shape. But you could imagine, in fact I have done this before, I've done fatsia japonica leaves, I've done fig leaves, they come out beautiful, they're really lovely and leathery, but they don't stay sort of rigid and turgid, as we would say in the flower arranging world, so they aren't any good for flower arranging with, but they do make fabulous sort of table setting pieces. If you wanted to set a table for autumn and you know got some lovely crockery and you want to put a preserved leaf on each and then put a napkin on top of that, that does work really well. And probably if I was going to do that, instead of putting the stems upright into a vase or a jug of the glycerin, I would probably get a casserole dish, something that was quite large, and pour my mixture in there and then just float the leaves on top so they can just soak up naturally like that. This is what my vase of flowers looks like. My vase of greenery 1 week after I put it in my solution of glycerin and water. So I thought you might like to see what it looks like. So I'm going to take everything out of the jug. And let's have a look, first of all, at the yucky solution that's left. It looks a little bit like pond slime. I will say it's not particularly dark. I have seen it looking much darker than this after a week. And then what about the greenery? Well, I've had some successes and some, I'm not going to call them failures just yet because I don't think enough time has passed, but some haven't taken up the solution quite so well. So the ones that have been successful are these straight stems of Cotoneaster. So this one here looks really good. All the water's taken up, but it's just looking a bit floppy at the tops. And actually, I don't mind that floppiness. It's given me a sense of movement to that very straight piece of greenery. But here, if it looks like it's sort of crinkling and not looking so well, you could always pinch off the end and just hope finishing with the last leaf that looks really healthy. So I'm going to put these two to one side and use them in an arrangement or store them. And I'll come on in a minute to how I store my pieces of greenery. Let's see, this one here is totally flopped over. So whereas the other two, I think I get away with the floppiness. I think on that one there, I am going to snip off that stem, but just leaving that top leaf so it sort of naturally tapers off. This is my Viburnum opulus. Now this has worked really well, and the leaves have gone a really dark mahogany brown, and they've still got, you can still see the veining and the sort of soft downiness of the underside of the leaf. So that's looking lovely as well. Some of the leaves have curled back on themselves. So I think if I was to think about storing this and using them, I would cut off the leaves that don't look perfect. I want the leaves that are looking nice and lush and aren't looking shriveled. So some of these are looking a little bit shriveled, and on the whole, I think they are the smaller leaves. So I think they've probably become overloaded with the glycerin mix, but doesn't that look really, really good, really striking? The next one is the beech. Again, that does really well. It's gone a slightly lighter brown than the Viburnum opulus. Problem here is I've got a ripped leaf, so it doesn't look very good, so I do need to trim that off. I'm going to trim it off to sort of the bud part of the leaf, and rather than having just a blank bit of stem, so it does just look as if the leaf has fallen off. And this is the ideal opportunity to go back through your leaves and just think, are some of them looking a bit worse for wear? So they're just looking a bit holy. I want the perfect leaves to be showing, so that has worked out really, really well. And on the back you get more of a sort of khaki colour. So I would say probably this is just at that tipping point for being practically perfect. I could put it back in to the solution for a few more days, or I could leave it out. So I think perhaps I might leave that one out, just so it has got a slightly lighter colour to it. This is more of the beech, and here I think it needs to go in a little bit longer. I don't know whether you can see from the leaves here, the veining, you can see the white veins, and I can see a darker brown haze along the veins, and then it fades out to that khaki colour. So it really does need to go in a bit longer, so that the gaps in between the veins also go that brownish colour. So I shall take the opportunity to recut the stems and then put that back into my container of the glycerin mix, so that can sit back there in the container. Elderflower has not been a success. I just thought, wouldn't it be lovely if I could preserve these berries on the elderflower and you know, just have those in winter decorations. As you can see here, they're just spilling out all over the place, and the leaves themselves just look really bedraggled. It's almost as if the glycerin mix has just been too heavy for it and it's just putting it down. So I am going to put that one in the compost heap, and I'm not going to try any more with that. So worth noting that the elder flower for me didn't work very well, and you may not. You know, perhaps you'll have a different variety and it might work for you, but it certainly hasn't worked for me this time. And then this is Hornbeam, and it looked like the glycerin was going straight to the top of the leaves, and you can see right at the tips the leaves are starting to flop a little bit. So again, it's that new growth, probably not strong enough to take up the glycerin, or the glycerin is overloading the structure of the leaf. But further down it's still quite green, so I'm going to leave this one in as well. And then these ones here, this is Hornbeam as well, but the leaves are starting to curl as if they haven't been in water. You know, if you've put something into a vase of water and it starts to die off and you discover the stem wasn't actually in the bottom of the water. So I think these are dying before they are actually taking up the glycerin. So what I might do here is just ditch this one as well. I just think it's not taking it up for some reason. So the bay leaves, now they haven't been particularly successful, or perhaps they just need more time. So these are taking on a really leathery sort of texture. And actually, when I touch that, I get this sensation of the glycerin sort of oozing out of the leaves. So you can see at the back here, this one's taken up more than this one. There's a little bit of deadheading needed at the top with that new growth that's just sort of shrivelling away. So I will recut the stem on that and put that back into the jug. And then the plane tree, this is a bit like a sycamore leaf. So the leaves look okay. The new growth is looking slightly droopy at the top, but the rest of the leaves look like they are doing okay, but they're still quite green, quite khaki in colour. So that will need perhaps another week before it takes up. And the Japanese maple, it's certainly turned colour. This was really fresh, vibrant green when I put it into the solution last week, and it's turning into a sort of yellowy khaki here, but I do think it could perhaps do with being in the solution for a little bit longer. These leaves at the end, again, it's the new growth, the young growth, and it's going a bit droopy, so I'm going to cut those out. Just being really careful when you do that. You want to end up, you know, not with a sort of straight stem at the end, but you want to be able to finish it off so it still looks like a really delicate leaf that sort of tapers off at the edge. But I think that could probably do with a few more days, so I'll recut the stem there. And my ivy, so again, it's starting to take up the colour. You can see here on this leaf that it hasn't quite reached the green tip there. It's doing okay. Again, the top leaves are just sort of shrivelling. It's that new growth and the sort of the heaviness of the glycerin that's causing that. But down at the bottom, where the leaves were a bit more robust and had hardened off a little bit, it looks like it's doing okay. So I think I will have to discard some of the top ends of those stems, but I won't do that for the moment. I'm going to recut and put that back in my vase. So I've got two more questions I've been asked as well. What do I use my preserved greenery for? And I'm a flower arranger, I'm a florist, so I would use them in flower arrangements. So when you get to autumn and you've got the lovely autumn tones out in nature, you cannot, well, it's very difficult to pick a piece of greenery, foliage, that's got those coppery autumn tones in, because as soon as you do that, the leaves start to fall off. So this is a really good way of imitating the natural tones of autumn by picking your greenery in the height of summer, giving it the glycerin treatment, and then come autumn time you can use that as a substitute for the natural changed greenery that we see on the trees. And then of course, with winter coming round the corner, and when all the greenery, the deciduous greenery in your garden has lost its leaves, rather than arranging flowers with sticks or having to go out and buy florist grown greenery, you've got the option during the sort of barren, cold winter months of having a touch of greenery in your arrangements, which you have preserved. So I guess it's much like if you're a jam maker. You make your jam when the fruit is abundant in order that you can eat it and store it for those times of the year when the fruit isn't naturally growing. And then the last question was, how do I store my my preserved greenery? So I've got two ways of doing that. Number one, I keep it in a basket in my workshop. So I've got it up on a shelf so it sort of looks attractive, it's readily available, you know, I'm not going to lose it, and I know where it is, and it sort of just makes my whole workshop have that lovely you know, floristry vibe to it. But if you didn't have the space, I would pack it into boxes. So if you're a flower arranger, you may well have some of those big flower boxes, and I would pack it end to end. So you'd have the greenery heads this end, and then the stems here, and at the other end of the box you'd have the greenery heads and the stems there, so they layered into one another. If you lay them all down the same direction, you'll have a really bulky section where you won't be able to get the lid on, and then you'll have all the bare stems at the other end. So do sort of layer them in together. And if you can't get hold of flower boxes, you may find at your local supermarket you can pick up the banana boxes, which have the base and the lid as well. But one thing to do, I would recommend that you name the box, just so you know what's in it. You don't have to go through a pile of boxes, you know, trying to find what you want. So the greenery I just showed you, I probably had that preserved. Some of it has been there for 2 or 3 years, I would think, so it is really long lasting. So as I say, I just like to have it out, so I've got something to decorate my workshop with. And there was another question that said, could you leave the greenery in a vase? So make your vase arrangement and have it sitting in the mix of glycerin. And I personally wouldn't do that. As you saw in the video, that the water, the liquid goes very brown, and the longer it's sitting there, the darker it goes, so it's not attractive at all. And you'll find that if your greenery takes up too much of the glycerin, it starts to ooze out on the underside as well. So I would just keep your greenery in the vessel with your water and glycerin mix for as long as it takes for the greenery to change colour. So that brings us to the end of the video. I do hope you've enjoyed watching it, and if there's any questions of yours I haven't answered, don't forget to leave me a comment and I will come back to you. So as ever, please do give this video a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. It really helps my videos get noticed the more people comment and share. That's all from me for now, and I'll see you next time.